Includes myself, Board Member Henderson from District 6, and Board Member Patty Bounds from District 7. I would like to begin by thanking everyone who has participated in this process, and particularly the members of the community who has provided feedback. I am grateful for Mrs. Henderson and Mrs. Bounds and their efforts on this committee, and to Dr. Tammy Grissom of TSBA and their work as our search consultant. I would also like to thank Board of Education Chair Christy and the rest of the board members for your work through this process. It has truly been a team effort. Finally, I would like to thank Principal Debbie Sayers and her team at Bearden High School for hosting us tonight. Isn't this a beautiful place right here in Knox County Schools? We are very excited to present two outstanding candidates this evening. Dr. Linda Cash is the Director of Schools for Bradley County Schools in Cleveland, Tennessee, a position held since 2015. We also have Dr. John Reiswick, Assistant Superintendent and Chief Academic Officer for Knox County Schools, a position held since 2017. Please join me in giving them a warm welcome to these two finalists. Give it up, give it up, give it up. We are also honored that WBIR journalist and news anchor John Becker is here to serve as our moderator. John, I'm handing it over to you. Take care of them.
Thank you, Ms. Satterfield, and thank you all for being here tonight, both in person and online. I think Ms. Satterfield said it best, that this is a legacy decision for the school board in Knoxville. One of the most important decisions we ever see in a community is picking the superintendent of schools, so it's an honor for me to play a role in this process. And I'm going to briefly outline the format that we'll see tonight, and then we'll get to the questions for the candidates for this position. First, I want to let you know that the questions in my hand haven't been seen by these two candidates, and they were submitted through the district website from the public, and Knox County Schools representatives from the Public Affairs Office have compiled them and put them into the questions that we'll hear tonight. As moderator, I may follow up or interject for some clarification, particular insight on a question or two, depending on the time limit. So that's some flexibility for me. When we start the question side of this, the questions will have answers that can be no more than 3 minutes, and I'll be stepping out to let the candidates know that they have 30 seconds left to wrap up their thought. They don't have to speak for 3 minutes, but they do have that option in the questions tonight. So with that, we want to get started, and we are moving first to opening statements. Dr. Cash, you'll have 10 minutes, and she does not have to use all of that time, nor do Dr. Reiswick. Thank you.
Thank you. 10 minutes is a very long time. If you've spent time in a classroom, that's almost an eternity. But what I want to say is it is a privilege to be here tonight and to be a part of this search. Having spent some time in schools today, I can tell you that the students are incredible. Their opportunities are wide open, and I really enjoyed just getting a feel for the schools. In my career, I have had the opportunity to be in elementary, middle, and high school, and what I know about all kids is that they want to learn, they deserve opportunities, and as we move through educating children, we need to begin to listen more and more and more to the children. It is understanding that education is complex. It is not what it was 10 years ago, nor will it be the same tomorrow. It continues to morph and to change, and as we, as educators, administrators, community members, and all sorts of leaders from churches to civics, we have to be a part of that change and invest in our students. I use the term invest because education is an investment. It is not a cost. It is an investment in our future. It is an investment in every child who steps through the schools. It is an investment in our future. We grow students. That's what we do. And if we can't get behind that and look at the changes that have to occur to meet their needs, we will take them further and further behind when our goal is to push them forward. I have 3 children, all graduates from public schools, all athletes, so I'm a firm believer in anything that you can get a child involved in extracurricular activities, whether it is sports, music, art, chess, they're better students and better people. They learn to cope with disparity. They learn grit, and I'm a firm believer in grit. You have to teach grit. Our students have grown up in a world that is instant. With the internet out there, it's, they're searching, they're moving, and we think that they're ready, and emotionally and mentally, they're not ready to accept all that information that's at their fingertips. So it's our job to teach them how to discern between what is right and what is wrong, and to be thinkers. As I watch students in the classrooms today and in the hallways, I am happy to report to everybody who is listening, these kids are happy. They want to be in school. They are surrounded by teachers who love them. At Austin East today, I had a wonderful student beside me telling me how awesome his teacher was and how much she cared about him, and that she had the rigor in the classroom and he was excited to be there. That's what we want for every student who walks in the door, to feel that when they're in the classroom. I think it's important to recognize that each community is different, each school is different, and so when we are working with our students and with our teachers and with our families, to recognize where they come from and honor where they come from so that we can meet their needs. I am just adamant that we stand our ground when it comes to fighting for our students. I think you have to have high integrity. You will never see me move away from my integrity. I firmly believe that our kids are the most valuable thing we have. And think about this. Our families drop those kids off. They're with us the majority of the day. They trust us, and we need to give that back to them. Give them reasons to trust us, reasons to tell what we're doing and where we're going, and to have input from our community. As I look across, and what I really want to leave you with, because I'm not going to take 10 minutes, is that everything matters. The way we speak to a child, the way we speak to a family, respect matters. Hearing them matters. And if we can be that open listening forum for them to communicate with us, and then for us to be able to begin to take action, to integrate everything within the community with those people that will help, then we are win. Looking at our failures and saying failures just launch us into something better. You can't hide from the failures. You admit the failures, and then you say, how do we move from this? How do we grow from this? Who do we become involved in? I am just privileged to be a part of this search, very privileged to already have met some wonderful administrators, teachers, think that this is a place that can grow and become exciting about education, and just look forward to interacting with you. I just want to leave you with, say, from the bottom of my heart, it is about kids, and there are people that will push in on us that make us forget that we're talking about kids. But if you are in a school or you're looking at a child, you become centered again. That's the reason we're here. That's why we do this. That's why we do the work. So I hope that you enjoyed tonight. Please know that you are welcome to approach me and talk with me. You may not want to talk about education. My husband hears a lot about education. I think sometimes he wants to talk about golf, and I want to talk about education. Just leave you with one experience to let you know that I am a heartfelt educator. So we had to evacuate last night because of a fire alarm. And in my head, I thought, wow, we're toward the middle of September. If we were in a school, we could log that as a fire alarm that we've already done, log it in the books, and move on and say, yep, check, we did that. But the other thing I saw is that teachers and administrators handle moving out of a building and checking on people much better than the general public. So thank you so much. I look forward to talking to you and look forward to interacting with you this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Cash. Dr. Reiswick.
Thank you, and I want to say again, thank you very much for this opportunity to be here tonight. It is exciting to be able to cast the vision for the future and have the opportunity to interview for a position for a district that I love dearly. I have been in Knox County Schools for roughly 20 years. My wife and I have two daughters that we have chosen intentionally to educate through Knox County School, which is not a decision any family should make lightly. But we feel they both have had great educations. My oldest daughter is now a freshman at the University of Tennessee, and my youngest daughter is a sophomore at Central High School. And again, our most valued possessions to trust with Knox County has meant a lot to me. Tonight is sweet for me to be at Bearden High School. This is where my teaching career began. I was an intern in 1999, and this is where I really fell in love with teaching. You go through the school and the prep and all the theory that you get, but it's here working with the science department at Bearden that I really fell in love with teaching. I was able to be intern of the year here, and that really kind of catapulted me to decide this is what I wanted to do with my life. I too have experience with suburban education. I have experience in rural education, taught in Roane County for a couple of years at Oliver Springs High School, and then also have spent the better part of my career in the urban core of Knox County. And I was reminded today, it was great to go out and see the visits. I was reminded today just of the greatness of this place. For me, to have this job really comes down to really having a vision for all students of Knox County. We have the resource to do this. For all students of Knox County to graduate prepared for their choice after they graduate, be it to be enrolled in another school, to be enlisted, or to be employed. We want them to be prepared to do that. I also believe that teachers should be treated as professionals. We have some of the best in the state. We have some of the best in the country, and our results prove that. We need to continue to do that. And I would like to, for the future, open up our schools to local businesses, because this is not something we can do alone to prepare our students for the future. I really have 4 ideas that I really want to focus on, because I do think with all the issues in education, it's easy to get distracted and to take our eye off of the ball. My 4 priorities that I'll focus on will be 1, excellence in foundational skills, and that really talks about the early literacy, that critical piece from K to 3, when students learn to read. What we know is after that point that students, their deficits are compounded every year from there. Another would be algebra for 9th graders. That's kind of the last chance for 9th grade students. Typically kind of honor students take that in the 8th grade. So the 9th grade algebra scores are critical to opening the door for math and science careers for them upon graduation. So that's another number we need to look at in those areas. Another is a great educator in every classroom, and I think that's twofold. That's where the magic happens. That's where teaching happens. The district office job is to support and work through policy and work through budgets and those sorts of things, but it's the job of the school and the classroom, and that starts with a great school leader who understands the vision of what we're focused on, and then every teacher working for that leader centered around kids. My third would be to have career empowerment. It is important, but a part of our role in our society and in our county is to prepare students for life after graduation so that they can be good citizens, they can be prepared to make the choices and not have choices made for them. And then finally, we always know in education, success for every student is going to matter. We have to pool resources in order to make every student group successful, and also to make every schools that have had chronically struggling issues in their past taken care of. And so to me, if we focus hard on those 4 things, the sky's the limit of where we can go with Knox County Schools, and students will be at the center of every decision we make.
Thank you, Dr. Reiswick. We're going to move to questions. And again, these questions come from the public, and they were put together by the public affairs team in Knox County Schools. And Dr. Cash, you drew number 1, so you get the first question. And both of you addressed this one in your opening remarks. But question number 1 is, why do you want to be the superintendent of Knox County Schools? You have 3 minutes.
So as you look about leadership, and that's what the director of schools is, it's a leadership position. That leadership is important, and it casts the vision to move the district forward. So when I started looking at the scores in Knox County, looking at websites, and there are a couple of things that I noticed. One is that there is a disparity in scores across the district, which tells me we have great opportunity to move forward with those schools and see where we can work and fit. So one of my hopes is that if I am selected, is that we take a deep dive into what's causing the disparity, and then we right that ship and we start moving everybody in the right direction. I look at influence, to be able to impact and influence over 60,000 kids, or almost 60,000 kids, 7,000 plus employees is a gift. It is something that I believe is doable with the right team and putting your team in place to move out. But when you can cast a vision and impact so many children and so many families and so many teachers and administrators, you are moving this whole community forward. And as we move the schools forward, the community moves with us. And that is why I look at this and think, what a great opportunity. An opportunity for me, but an opportunity to pull other people along. When we met with community leaders today, there was a definite feel that they wanted to be involved. They want to assist. They want to be in there and help us move everybody forward and get the job done. Public education is the foundation of this country. It is the foundation of where we need to stay and where we need to go. So we have to get it right. Visiting with students, hearing parents is a piece of that. But why do I want to do it? Because we can make great opportunities for kids. We can provide them with an education that can take them somewhere in their life, and it may be places they've never even thought about going. So I'm just very excited, especially when I start to look at where teachers are and where they want to be and where their hearts are. It is valuable to be able to impact that many people and that many students.
Thank you, Dr. Cash. Dr. Reiswick, 3 minutes.
Thank you. Why do I want to be superintendent and lead this district at this time? So I would say this is a very exciting time in education. We have, coming off of a pandemic, or maybe we'll never come off of a pandemic. I'm not sure where we are with that, if we'll be living with this for a while or not. But I will say this, one thing the pandemic did cause was a sense of urgency and attention back to the classroom. So if that was from families engaging virtual learning and being part of that and really understanding what teachers and educators do every day, what we have in our community here at home is a heightened awareness of education. People, it's back on their radar, it's back a priority for them, and they're interested and they're asking questions and they're passionate about it. So team that with our leadership that we have right now at the university, team that with our leadership that we have. We're fortunate to meet with the city and county mayors today, and just their focus on education and understanding the importance of that moving forward, and looking at the talent and the team and the strength that we have in the district. I think that we're just on the cusp of a huge explosion. I think, again, I'm going to go back to what's important for us is to not take our eye off the ball and focus on certain things. I think we have the urgency of the public. When you see certain things, I'll throw out a few numbers for you. Third grade reading, extremely important for us. We've hovered around 40% in the 3 years prior to the pandemic, which I will tell you is crisis level in my mind when 60% are not proficient at that level. We can and will do more. But what we saw happen through the pandemic was that percent of proficiency dropped to 34.7%, okay? So we know now that there's a sense of urgency. People understand that, they know that. When you start talking about subgroup data on that, if you're a Hispanic student, that's at 18%. If you are a black student, that's 15.7%. If you're a student with disabilities, that's a 9.4% proficiency. We can do better. We can do better by focusing our attention and resource in those areas. And what I think is our community and our leaders are ready to do something in a major way about that. And I want to be part of that.
Thank you, Dr. Reiswick. And both of you, again, addressed some of this in your comments, but this is the second question from members of the public. If you are chosen as superintendent, what are the 1 or 2 main priorities you will focus on for the school system? And what are the biggest challenges in addressing those priorities? And Dr. Reiswick, you get to go first on this question.
Okay, thank you. As I've said before, I think where we are in our academic performances, that's got to be one of the first ones. Again, you don't chase third grade reading and ninth grade algebra. Those are all barometers or measures to the end game for schools, which is students who are prepared when they graduate high school to pursue what they need to pursue. So I would have to say getting those things right foundationally, as I said earlier, every year past third grade that you aren't reading on a proficient level, the learning gets harder and harder, and the gap of the loss gets higher and higher. We've got to be able to figure that out, and I have plans to look at that. I think we need to partner. I had conversations with President Boyd and Chancellor Plowman today. I think an untapped resource is University of Tennessee in our backyard. I tell them a story. Some of you may know I was the principal at Fulton High School about 10 years ago, and in that we did a reform that took a graduation rate from 43% to 85% in 3 years. We did that with a lot of hard work and a lot of focus. We also had a partnership with Stanford University where we would fly teachers out there and they would come back and do an analysis with us. My question was always, why are we flying to Stanford when we have the University of Tennessee in our backyard? I really feel like that we have a chance to partner with UT in a way to be more than just a place to produce teachers, but to be an innovative partner, to write dissertations, to help us do research and be a real thought incubator in getting some things done. So instead of doing the work ourselves, I think there are plenty of opportunities to partner in those kind of situations. So I definitely think that's one. I mentioned what's inhibiting some of this. Some of this is our teacher workforce right now. I mean, we do know national trends show that, and we're experiencing locally that there's a shortage of teachers. So I think the new name of the game in teaching is no longer recruiting. It's going to be how do you build alternative pipelines to manufacture high-quality teachers. And what we have to know is this. Currently, if you have a certification, we'll hire you. We've got to be able to raise that standard to have enough of a pool to be able to find high quality for every classroom, because the research shows that's what turns it around for students, multiple years of high-quality teachers. So we've got to become innovative with how we go about recruiting and how we go about producing teachers who can deliver on that. A few things we've done with the University of Tennessee, we have a Grow Your Own program, which is a way for us to be able to take people like teaching assistants and turn them into special ed teachers. We have another program that's Grow Your Own that we do with Central, Fulton, and Austin East high schools that will try to identify junior and seniors in high school that are interested in coming back to be teachers and using them for that. But we've got to go beyond that and find other ways to be able to have the general public to re-engage them if they want purpose and meaning in their life to change the future of the community to become teachers for us.
Thank you, Dr. Reiswick. Dr. Cash, your 3 minutes on that second question.
Thank you. Again, you do go back and you look at your data, and what your data tells you is that you have disparities in what is happening in your schools, especially in those elementary levels. So you have to go back, and this would be one of my priorities. Look at the curriculum that's being used, look at how the curriculum is being implemented, and how do we correct anything that's negative that's happening and affecting our kids. Curriculum matters. And so that's number one. Are you looking at your curriculum, and can you build teams inside your schools and build leaders inside your schools that address those issues and concerns? It is very much on my radar to have an open listening atmosphere. Tell me what you need. That was one of the questions I asked the principals today, was what do you need? What is keeping you from moving forward? And I think that's a back and forth conversation that has to continue. You do look at literacy very heavily, but it's not just why, it's not just the why, it's the what. What are we using? How are we using it? And is it effective? And when you start digging into those things and you get a viable curriculum that goes across the district, it's not one's using this and one's using this and one using this. That viable, reliable curriculum that is in place, that's implemented correctly, you will begin to close those gaps, because there is no reason that any student should be sitting in single-digit achievements. That tells me we've got issues within what we're implementing and what we need to do. But the one thing I will tell you, when you look at curriculum and you look at the instructional patterns, what you're looking for is, what do we need to help? How do we need to assist? Not to go in and say, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, but hey, this is our reflection. What do you see? That back and forth conversation that helps teachers know that we're there to help. I think it is very valuable to have those conversations. So looking at curriculum, making sure we've got the right curriculum, having an open door policy where you are imperatively scheduling to have conversations with teachers and students and parents and community leaders. So that inclusive environment that says, here's what our data says, but not missing, and this is one thing I truly believe, students and schools are more than the data that is printed on proficiency levels and gains. It is, how are we growing them socially and emotionally? So that's the second phase. Look at those social emotional pieces and see what kind of constructs we need to put in place so that we have healthy students and healthy teachers.
Just a quick follow-up to both of you on that question, because you both raised disparities and also third grade reading scores in particular. That's something this community has heard a lot over the last several years about that crisis, and it seems ongoing. Do you see a particular solution that has worked in other districts? Is it more reading coaches in the early grades? Is it smaller class sizes? I think all of us know that there's no silver bullet to the solution, but is there something that either of you have seen in other districts that you think that may be something we want to try in Knox County? Dr. Reiswick, you answered first, so I'm just going to you for that.
No, thank you. I think you're right, and there are no easy solutions in education. A lot of hard work in those areas. So I would say things that are important to us and I think could make a difference. We just recently started our first cohort of reading specialists, taking current Knox County school teachers who are good at reading and trying to fill that skill gap and knowledge gap by having them work at the University of Tennessee to become certified reading specialists. I think the same is true again. If the school is where it happens, then we have to make sure we're tooling the leaders of the schools and the teachers of the schools with what they need. So versing them in the science of reading, which is now a requirement for any student who's coming out to teach in elementary school. My thought again is let's partner with a post-secondary partner who's already doing that as part of there, so that we can stay fresh and current on current practice with that. But even more so, let me give you a quick stat on this too. Of our sitting principals that have over 5 years or more experience, they do a great job, but 45% of them don't have more than 5 years experience. So what have we done? And I've been part of the county, so I'm looking at what have we done to be intentionally purposeful in training them in the science of reading and training them in organizational leadership. I think we've got folks that we can do that and help them be better at executing and maximizing their potential.
Thank you. Dr. Cash?
So just to follow up with that, so in Bradley County, one of the things that we purposely did was we started pulling in a viable curriculum and training our teachers on how to use that curriculum. We also partnered with an organization that provided that support and the training. So it was a model where teachers got to watch it in action. They got to be viewed in action with coaching all along the way. So it's that coaching of the teachers and building their stamina and understanding of how to teach reading. What I wanted to see and what I now see is that it doesn't matter which school you go in, and this was a 3-year process actually, it wasn't done overnight, is that you can, any school you go in, you see high quality instruction with high quality materials with the support in place. So not only do we have instructional coaches that are coaching, but we also created leaders in our schools. So we have reading teacher leaders. They're in the classroom, but they're doing the training and taking it back to those teachers. We have math teacher leaders that do the same. They come, they are coached, and we coach them. They go back in and they implement it and help teachers. So once we started building leadership within the school, you started seeing a strength in the instruction and a strength in ownership. And I think that's extremely important. At the district level, we can't push something in. We have to listen and build teachers up and build that capacity level. So when anyone leaves, there's another teacher ready to take the load. I will tell you that working with universities is valuable. I will tell you the most valuable thing, though, is to be sure that the teachers have the right support and the right training so that they feel good about where they are. And then when you start looking at those benchmark scores, and if those kids started scoring, below level or severely below level, the second one you start seeing them, they're in the middle range, and by that third one, they are hitting on target or in mastery, then you know everything you did worked. That's when you see those teachers celebrate. The other thing that I would highly recommend that is probably pushed across all districts is teachers need to know and understand the data. If they don't know and understand the data, it's just us talking to them. So we took a deep dive into what does the data actually mean? What does it look like? What does it mean? What does it mean to the teacher? What does it mean to the assistant? What does it mean to the RTI? Putting names to those data. We have sheets where we have Lexils listed, issues that have with those students, and we are watching them grow and move, but the teachers have the data talks, the teachers examine the data, and they own what's happening in their schools. That's when we started to see the shift, when it wasn't us going in, but it was driven by the teacher and driven by the administrators.
Thank you for allowing us to dive more deeply in the specifics there. Question 3, and Dr. Cash, this is to you. We're going to move on to the category of teachers and school employees. One of the questions that was submitted mentioned a trend of educators leaving the classroom and said that in Knox County Schools, we currently have unfilled positions in core content areas and can expect this trend to continue. What will you do to help Knox County Schools retain current teachers and attract needed teachers? Dr. Cash?
So this is just not only an issue and a concern in Knox County, it is across the state of Tennessee and across the nation. I have very good friends who watch the data and start informing me of where we are and what we're happening. So you have to have a very specific, intentional plan of recruiting and retaining teachers and recognizing when you are going to have retirees. How many am I going to have? How many slots do I have to fill? And then you start figuring out this university is here, this university is here, but are there other people out in the community and out beyond our community that we can reach out to. And basically, we're selling our schools. Hey, we've got the greatest schools you will ever find. Come look at what we do. Let's get out there on social media and boast about what we do. Come work with us. Talking to the chancellor today, I believe that when those freshmen come in, that we are on the campus and our teachers are on the campus talking to those young people who come in and say, have you thought about being a teacher? Let's embed those people in our schools. Let's put situations where they have firsthand information with a mentor teacher. If we can partner them with a mentor teacher, they are going to feel better about coming in. We have so many that don't know what educating a child is. It's changed, it's morphed. Students can't sit in the seat and fill out worksheets. That's not what we do anymore. So if they come in on the front end and we're embedding them with a mentor, we can do that. But as my children would tell me, our old habits of posting a job and expecting people to come to us is no longer going to work. We have to go out and seek them. We have to talk to community members. Do you know anyone who's interested in teaching? One of the most recent things that have helped me is that the State Department has given us pathways that allow us to bring teachers in a different pathway, the Grow Your Own pathway, where we can embed the Grow Your Own. We're partnering with those education entities, and they are training while they're teaching. We also have situations now where if you have a bachelor's degree, you've decided you want to come into teaching, that we have a fast-track pathway with very little money. Well, it's a lot of money, but little money compared to a normal track, that we can get them certified to teach. I will tell you, working with the legislatures, they have tried their best to clear the pathway to bring it in, so it's a statewide effort. And I think as long as we're continuing that path and recognizing we have to create our own, that's the only way we're going to fill the seats with quality people.
Thank you, Dr. Cash. Dr. Reiswick, your take on recruitment especially.
Thank you. I want to start by saying two things I want to speak to. One is salary, and I want to say this and give credit to our current superintendent, Bob Thomas, who has made that one of his priorities to continue to give teacher raises every year to the extent possible. And I want to say I would have that same commitment. Definitely something I've learned from him. You know, we need to pay our teachers what they're worth and treat them professionally. Some statistics on that. Currently, Knox County ranks 32nd out of the 146 districts in salary, which is, again, definitely an improvement since Mr. Thomas has been in. But I will let you know that of the 5 big districts, Knox County the last 3 years has ranked 5th in average salary. In our 11 districts that surround us, we rank 7th. So although work has been done, there is still work to do to make sure that we can build a fence around Knox County and keep our teachers here that want to be here. I would say that, again, as I said earlier, recruitment is not the key now. Ways to manufacture teachers through alternative pipelines, and that is going to be finding other ways to have people. An example of that we've done in Knox County in the last 2 years is we've launched our own educational prep provider, an EPP, that every university has in order to have teachers. We started one 2 years ago that we can certify our own CTE teachers, and we have that in our first cohorts going through that right now. There are options to expand that beyond CTE into other hard-to-staff areas, so that's one way you could do it. We have this big void that we're not going to be able to, even if we could hire every student coming out of educational prep providers in the state, we wouldn't be able to fill that void. So we're going to have to come up with alternative ways. I've had 2 conversations with organizations in Memphis and Nashville that have alternate recruiting pipelines for teachers to get people to get graduate degrees who just have a degree who want to teach. But we need to bring pride back to the profession. We need to make a call to the community. We need to make a call to young people who are in other areas that this is a noble profession. And if you really want to change the future of your community, be a teacher, because that is who shapes the future and will shape the future in Knox County.
Thank you, Dr. Reiswick. And question number 4 will be to you as well. Here in Knox County, the superintendent works with Knox County Education Association. And one question asked was this: how would you describe your working relationship with Teachers Association presently?
That's a good question. Thank you. I enjoyed one of our stops today was to meet with Paula Hancock and her leadership team. I'm proud that I've served on our collaborative conferencing team for the last 5 years and been part of the negotiations in the contract that comes to the table. Let me say again, I value teachers, and we need to continue to grow them and give them leadership opportunities. I would describe the relationship as a very strong relationship. I think they have the same interests we have in our conversation today. You know, kids come first, and I don't think there's a teacher in Knox County that you couldn't ask that wouldn't say we should be student-focused on students first. And when you start with that common ground in those discussions, I think everything else kind of falls into place. So we talked to them. I talked to them today about it's important that we agree on certain things, and it's also important that they're a critical friend to us, and we are to them as we have conversations. And they agreed that we've got a trusting relationship where we should be able to have those kinds of conversations. So, again, I think my commitment, as I said before, will be to continue to increase teacher pay so that we can pay them professionally what they're worth. But there are other things we can work on too. I think they're open to the other ideas for alternative pathways. They're concerned as we are with what's happening with teachers and teacher retention and that sort of thing. So I think it is going to take a community of people who are focused on that and focused on students to be able to solve those problems.
Thank you, Doctor. Dr. Cash?
I think one of the things that I will say are the teachers are the backbone of what happens in the classroom. So to have a working relationship with any entity, especially the teachers, the teacher representatives, sends a message of trust and a back and forth that can happen. We want all teachers and all entities to understand that open-ended questions and finding solutions together and brainstorming together to give our teachers what they need is the most valuable thing we can do. Teachers often feel more comfortable going to those teacher reps and those teacher leaders rather than coming to people that are higher up. That's why you have to have that working relationship with them. I think their goals are the same as ours, to have a working environment that is conducive to safety. It's conducive to teachers being able to teach and do their job. We often have situations in schools now that teachers may not feel like they have the support they need, and having those conversations about how do we help them and what do we do sends a message that we are all on board and all on the same page. It is, and I think every teacher and every teacher rep is about what is good for kids, and what is good for kids is what we want, but we also have to protect our teachers and support our teachers. If we're not supporting our teachers, then we're not going to get the results in the classroom. They're tired, and we need to recognize that they're tired and recognize how hard they work, and to give them as many opportunities as we can to be celebrated and respected.
Just a quick follow-up on that to both of you, and I'll give you 2 minutes to respond. But Dr. Cash, I had a Knox County parent ask me recently, what if we doubled teacher salaries and cut class sizes in half? We're able to hire that many teachers. Would that make a difference in a short term, or is that just pie in the sky, magic wand kind of thinking?
It sounds like a beautiful thing, especially being able to pay them double, which would not even touch what they're really worth. What I have seen and what I know is that the research says is that decreasing that class size does not automatically impact student achievement and student growth. What does impact that is a teacher who is well supported, well trained, and feels like they have the tools they need in the classroom. If we could do that and we could find them, it would always be very careful about where you put them and how you utilize them, because teachers impact so many kids that you do not want to dilute. If you've got one great teacher, they can impact 30 kids more than a mediocre teacher can impact 15 kids. So there's research out there that shows, the teacher effectiveness and how it moves in and affects children. And you can look at the McRae studies, and it will tell you that a highly effective teacher and a highly effective principal end up with results with highly effective and higher performing students. So it's the people that make the difference, and how well they're trained and whether they feel supported. But we will take the money and reduce the class sizes.
Thank you, Dr. Cash. Dr. Reiswood.
No, thank you. I would say definitely, increasing pay would be nice for teachers, but and we well deserved. But I'm not sure that that's the solution long term to keep people from leaving the profession, because I think when you have class sizes that big, we'd probably see a mass exodus in the following years. I think there are other things like teacher mentorship, having them partner with an effective educator that has had success with students, and having that person to learn from. Like that's probably a better example of that. I know right now even we have teachers that are doing what's called job embedded. They may have come straight from industry or from their degree but had not gone through a teacher prep program, and they're assigned to schools but can kind of teach on a temporary sort of license. And we're talking about those people probably will leave us too, if not tied to a mentor and someone to help them see the ropes and how to do those kinds of things. So I think those will be better spent. Definitely the money would be nice, but I appreciate the fact there's some innovative thinking about how we do that. But I think that level of a class size would probably lead to a bigger exodus. But I do think mentorship and training and that kind of thing are the things that we need to look to.
Thank you for indulging me. All right, question 5, Dr. Cash, this is to you. And we're going to talk about academics. Another question submitted by a community member says, what do you see as being the biggest factors in children learning loss? How will you proactively work toward helping these children and their families?
Well, the first thing you need to recognize is that children come into us very differently prepared of where they are. So children come into us on grade level and moving all the way through. They're most likely going to stay on grade level if we have an effective teacher in the classroom. Kids that come below us, it takes 3 times as much intervention and as much instruction to pull them up to close that gap. So now that we've had children who they have been interrupted, we are now seeing that it is going to take more. But what we have to do is really look at what standards are they missing and analyze where those standards are and focus in on those standards where we can close the gap if we target this standard, and this standard. We had tremendous success in summer school this past year because we had my team who analyzed all of those standards and clustered where the kids were missing their standards from their benchmarks. So the summer school lessons were focused on those standards for those kids. We saw tremendous growth when they came back to school, that the standards that we focused on started closing that gap. So I think you have to be intentional about the work you're doing. I think you have to use your data, and then I think you have to have a viable curriculum that kids can access. And I also think it needs to be valuable to the student and to their culture and how and what they learn. Those hands-on approaches are valuable. One of the pieces that we did was we brought high school students down to embed STEM in the lessons, and when you watch those underperforming kids be embedded in those kind of reactions, and they were having to apply what they had learned to a project, which I actually saw some of that today, their scores and their confidence is what improved. If you watch a kid and they're a poor learner, you will see their confidence dip. Then all of a sudden when they're starting to catch up, and remember, catch-up growth is 2 to 3 years behind, takes triple the amount of time it does from a normally academic kid. So you're pouring that into them. When they start to see success, their confidence comes up. When that confidence comes up, they will tackle material better than they did when the confidence wasn't there. So it has to be intentional. It has to be looking at where are the losses, not just a global approach to we're going to read more. It is very specific about what you do with those kids.
Thank you. Dr. Reiswick, learning loss and how you tackle it.
Yeah, let me say, I mean, we know the interruptions to learning is really what's taken its toll over the last 2 years. You know, the start-stop, the virtual, non-virtual, this is the change to that. And I'll say we've gotten better at a lot of the virtual pieces, but, you know, in those learning phases, there were probably lots of interruptions to that learning. I think what you're looking at is really doubling down on things like RTI, which is an intervention program. We're seeing more kids in that right now as we're seeing academic outcomes fall, which was interventions during the day. We have summer programming. This summer will be a 4-week for grades K through 8 for students who have fallen behind, which gives them additional time and allows our teachers to stay on and provide some opportunities there. A big one that we're using our ESSER 3.0 dollars for is we're looking to hire 250 tutors. Some of those will be in 150 will be in the K-3 classrooms to help another set of hands teaching people how to and helping fill in those gaps of reading. And 100 will be in the middle schools helping on the math deficits that we have there. I'll say this, we're going to have to also go outside of traditional markets to find those. Those jobs are posted for us now, so I'll do a quick plug. We're looking for different kinds of people. We're looking for people who may be child care providers who work a second shift. We need you first shift in our schools. We may be looking for the stay-at-home parent who's saying, I want to give back to my community. We're looking for the college student. who maybe not think that they could have a job working with us during this time around their class schedule. We need those folks in the room. We have the dollars for the next few years to make a difference with that, with the idea of closing the gap, and we need to maximize those with those kinds of folks.
Thank you. Question number 6, and Dr. Reiswick, this to you. Again, we're going to stay on academics here. Another question says, how will you help improve the special education programs, both in person and virtual, if you are offered the position as superintendent? Dr. Reiswick?
No, thank you. You know, when I said in the beginning that Knox County School needs to provide an excellent education for all students, I mean, all includes our special ed students. And so I know that each one of those situations can be a little different depending on what needs that student needs. But I think we are turning the corner. It is, again, is kind of an incremental case by case of what we're finding out. I think by and large we do a good job. We push for things like inclusion in classrooms. Our goal is that 75% of the time most of our students can be in. We've made gains over the last 4 or 5 years in that area, trying to have students in the gen ed classroom as much as possible. I think that's great when you have a certified subject area teacher who's teaching alongside with the modifications required for a special ed student. We've seen, virtual was a little bit different, but we're also seeing that as it grows and we grow our capacity to do that, and sometimes it's a hybrid model, that's growing for us as well. Talking to Jason Myers, who is our executive director over student supports, he talked to me yesterday about we needed some more budget dollars for students with hearing disabilities for sign language, because so many students are staying now after school for extracurricular. We gladly put that money aside for that. That tells us that we have another population that feels like part of the population, as they should, and we're willing to put those supports in those places. So I don't know if there's one answer for how you do that with special education across the board, but I do think we're looking in any of those situations to try to increase that as best we can so that all kids can be successful.
Thank you. Dr. Cash?
So with our special populations, one of the things that I found and that I push pretty hard is that we front load those students. In other words, they are being exposed to the curriculum early, and they're learning the vocabulary. So we're basically front loading them, and then they go into the regular classroom for instruction. When you front load those students and you're tutoring those students, they go in having prior knowledge that they need, because they can't access the curriculum on their own a lot of times. So if we have front loaded them and we use the same curriculum that is used in the general ed program for the content, then they go in and they are seeing success. Some of our highest gains were with our special ed students, especially at the high school level, when we use that model. So they are pulled basically during advisory, working with the special ed teacher, the assistants, and also the classroom teacher. The lessons are pre-taught. The lessons are read and taken, notes are taken, so that when they enter the classroom, they're already at a level of success. That has been very successful for us. I also will tell you that when we switched and we started using the exact curriculum on grade level with those students, we started seeing gains. Now, you do have to back up and work with their IEPs and also provide those interventions for them that target what their needs are. But that access to the general curriculum and front-loading that material is extremely powerful and successful. With our interventions with our virtual students, we did synchronous and asynchronous lessons so that we had teachers, live teachers teaching them, so they were engaged in those, and we used routines so that the students would know and the parents would know what we were doing and how we were doing it. We also had a model where some of our speech therapists worked visually online with them, and we actually brought the parents in and taught them some of the skills. I think virtually is an area that we're all continuing to morph and grow into because it's used more and more. But with our special ed students, we were very particular about how we did it and what we did, and exposing them on a daily basis so that they did not need to hit those gaps. You still saw loss because you cannot replace a student in front of a teacher, a live teacher, but we did find that those synchronous lessons made a huge difference.
Thank you. We're going to move to question 7, and Dr. Cash, this will be for you. First, one thing that the district has emphasized in recent years is career technical education, or CTE. What is your experience with those programs, and what are your plans for CTE programs in the future?
Many years ago, our career and technical programs, we received a huge grant that allowed us to broaden that spectrum. So in the CTE world, you have pathways, and students have to engage in those pathways, and you want them to be completers. So they're doing three years of completion, or 3 courses of completion. So what we found is engaging with our industry and our community and partnering with those and using those as advisors. We have now taken on a system where we have more programs that are being offered. We also are opening a PI Innovation Center, which is a combination of CTE programs, business and industry. One of our major partners is Wright Brothers Industry, and so we started a medium heavy truck is one that we're starting, and then Wright Brothers actually took on our 16 and our 17 and our 18-year-old kids, and they actually embedded all the practices on their site. So we've got 17 and 18-year-old kids that are running those big machines. They're going through all the phases and stages of welding and mechanics. So working with that company, they get the instruction from us, the classroom instruction, but that hands-on with those industries and business are what's making the difference. We also think it's important to increase and continue to increase our work-based learning. So those CTE programs allow our kids to earn industry certifications. It allows them to do dual enrollment with our community colleges as well as our TCATs. So they are coming out of high school with they may be a certified welder, they may be ready to go into the industry, or they may be ready to go on into a higher education learning. But our belief is the more pathways we can create for these kids, the more integration of business, industry with our students, and teaching them what actually happens in the workplace is what's making the change with our students. I firmly believe students are not limited in what they can do. They have to have the training and the trust and the mentors. I think both of us keep continuing back to mentors. I had the privilege of going to Germany to see the Wacker Institute and what they did with their work-based learning. And when you see a seasoned work person, this person actually only made one item for Wacker, and they are building their own program. So they pair these students with mentors. They're training them the trade. And when I started asking questions about, well, what do you do about behavior problems or kids not coming to school, they don't have those issues because they're training those kids in a profession that they can launch into after high school. So there's a purpose behind them being there.
Dr. Reiswick, the question to you, career technical education programs.
Yeah, career technical education programs are very important to Knox County Schools. So part of one thing that we've been saying and that I would continue is that we want every high school to have a robust CTE program as well as an advanced academic program. We believe that a student shouldn't have to leave their zoned high school to have exposure to that. CTE is interesting, especially when you're dealing with a large district like our own. What we see models across the state are typically smaller districts that can kind of have, if you think about a vocational center that can be shared by a few schools, that's a little more difficult when you have 16 high schools spread out. So we have to build a system in order for that to happen. What we see models across the state are typically smaller districts that can kind of have, if you think about a vocational center that can be shared by a few schools, that's a little more difficult when you have 16 high schools spread out. So we have to build a system in order for that to happen. And so we started a contract in a process with Forward Next Generation Learning about a year ago that they came to the table, and we've had 4 meetings with about 150 business leaders, school leaders, parents, students, elected officials, talking about what could that master plan look like for Knox County Schools. How could we make sure that we have equitable opportunities across the board in all 16 of our high schools? What are those? What's the job market say? And we've had huge interest in that. So we just finished our 4th meeting up in January, which is the final, and now we're writing that master plan that will guide our work for the next 10 years, 5 to 10 years. So we're excited about that. One thing we know that has to be in place is a more robust grades 6 through 12 career counseling, which involves not just our guidance counselors, but our entire model of how we reimagine high school. And that means that students need exposure to careers, they need aptitude testing, and every student in Knox County needs that. Unfortunately, right now, a lot of that is kind of left up to those families who do kind of pursue that and look for that. We need to make sure it's systematic throughout. And again, it's not just on our counselors. We're looking at things like freshman academies. How do we make big schools small? How is every kid known, and how do we have that same process for every student so that we can make sure they're going into the career of their choice? And we can't do that without local business partners and local post-secondary ed partners at the table with us. We're working right now with the mayor and with TCAT at a potential opportunity for us to involve Austin East, Fulton, and Central High Schools at a location to offer a trades program that will allow us to be able to bus students there to take advantage of that. So more for that to come in the next year, but we're excited about that.
Just a quick fact question for our viewers and the audience. You mentioned 16 high schools. How many of those high schools have an option for CTE right now?
Every one of them. So we have a program in every one of those high schools. Again, I want to add that our goal is robust CTE programming. So we want to make sure that, by what we mean by that is there's an industry partner or partners associated with that. What we see lots of times in CTE programming is as a program grows, as long as that teacher is there. And when they go back to industry, lots of times we lose that. What we need are industry partners who keep that program alive, help us with adjunct professors, help us with internships, help us with externships from for our teachers, and have that kind of exposure so that program is a bedrock in each one of those schools and recognizable there.
And Dr. Cash, that sounds exactly like the experience that you had at Rockford.
And one of the things that you have to look at cost savings, and so to cluster schools and have schools go to one entity or even into the businesses is a much more cost-effective way than trying to provide every program at every high school. So that's the purpose behind facilities like John was talking about, is that you are allowing more programs to be actively engaged, and you can center those where that you are taking away all of the barriers for kids not to have those opportunities. And busing is one of them, getting them to the place so that they can practice what the industry needs.
Thank you. Question number 8, we're coming up on an hour into our discussion. Again, we're going to go until 8 o'clock tonight for our viewers online. We're appreciative of you joining us as well. Let's move to some hot button topics that the district has faced in recent months. Dr. Reiswick, this question to you. We received a large number of questions that expressed frustration about masks, particularly now that restrictions around the country have been lifted. Knox County Schools is under a federal order requiring masks to be worn in schools. If the district was not under a federal order, what would be your opinion on wearing masks in schools? Dr. Reiswick?
So masks have been an issue in Knox County? No.
Your school board members, they haven't heard anything about it.
They haven't heard anything. We'll educate them tonight then. How about that? I'll say this. Part of the role of the leader of a district will be to keep focus of the district. As the leader goes, so does the rest of the team and the staff, right? So I think it's critically important that a leader of a district focuses on what they can control and minimizes what they can't control. And I'm going to go back to the 4 things I said before. We focus on the academics, on early foundational skills, on being ready for careers, on bringing in effective teachers, and success for every student and building those things out. Those are things that a superintendent can control. And those are things, whether a child's wearing a mask or not wearing a mask, can continue. And I think that's important for us to be able to do that. I will say this from my view, because the question was about that. I think our local school board had it correct coming into this year, that it was a parent's right to make that choice, and that a parent could choose to put their child in a mask or not have their child in a mask. And I think, again, the board, with talking to their constituency and the general feel for Knox County and considering health, made that choice and made that vote. So, again, sometimes things are out of your control, and you have to just focus on what you can control. And for us, it's always going to go back to students and their academic outcomes.
Dr. Cash, your thoughts on masks in schools?
I think that I agree with John in the sense that we can lose focus and start focusing on the things that distract us from what our real goal is. And so when I look at the view of a mask or no mask, I think that is something that as district levels that we have to recognize that those are outside of our control at this point in Knox County, but to really understand that our focus has to be on the students and moving those students forward. So if you spend so much time on talking about whether to mask or not to mask or a lawsuit or no lawsuit, then you are not doing what you need to do, which is teaching children and focusing on academics and the social emotional parts. I think that This whole country has been ripped apart in the past 2 years with COVID, and I think it's time for us to focus on what really matters, and that's students in the classrooms and teachers in the classrooms. So flipping that narrative to say, we worry about this, but that's not our focus. I want kids to be in school, be healthy, and be focused on academics.
I definitely hear you on that. I just think our viewers and folks in the audience will want to hear your response based on Dr. Ryswick's response, who said he supported what the school board did when they voted against a mask mandate. Do you support that, or do you see it differently?
Well, I can tell you what we did in Bradley County. In Bradley County, with the support of our board, it was an optional for parents. Parents could do that if they wanted to, but there was no mandate in Bradley County. We saw great success with that. It was pretty much a split or a no split, with some wearing masks, some not. I would support that board's decision because I think their intent and their focus was on the students and the academic needs of the students.
Thank you, Dr. Cash. We're going to move on to question 9, and that is, we received a large number of questions about educational equity, and both of you have talked about this at length this evening. One question asks, what concrete steps will you prioritize to address the disparities in education and discipline in Knox County that occur alongside race, class, and geography? As all of us know, this is a very unique district with schools that are urban, suburban, and rural. Dr. Cash will send this question first to you.
So I think first you need to clarify with equity, and equity to me is access and having an environment where all students have access and are treated fairly. I think that you have to listen to a kid and know where the kid is coming from. I think you cannot tolerate large disruptions in your schools. You cannot tolerate disciplinary actions that are punitive when they should be less knowing where the child's coming from and what you're doing. So I think you have great policies in place that establish the processes and procedures, and in those processes and procedures, you're hearing the whole story, not just reacting on one end, because what we want is the student in the classroom learning, the student at school feeling safe. What I truly believe is if you have a school that you have access for kids to higher level learning, you have access for AP classes, you have access for honors classes, but you are also providing art, music, all those things that engage kids. If kids are engaged and they know that that's a safe place, you're going to have fewer and fewer disruptions. We also, however, need to know that communities that kids come from are very different, and so there may be turmoil in the community. They bring that into the classrooms and into it. So we need to provide a safe place for all students to have the opportunities to release and understand. Let me tell you what happened last night. The reason I can't do this is this was what happened. That's restorative practices, and putting in place restorative practices which allows that safe, I need to talk about this, I need to tell you about this, creates an environment where we are restoring the child back to their base so that we can move forward. That has to be intentional. You have to be intentional about training, and you have to be intentional about giving teachers the support, administrators the support to do that. I believe you put positive behavior supports in place, which means the norms that are in a school may not be the norms that are in a class or at home. So you start teaching in schools or in businesses, we act like this, we speak like this, we do this. We know that's not how it happens at home. We honor and respect that. But let's talk about the norms here. There are times with your friends that it's different, but this is what we want. But if we never talk to them about it and we just react because they do something that's out of the norm, then we're doing a disservice to our students, but we're really doing a disservice to ourselves for not understanding where they come from. So just to kind of recap, I think it's important to know where your students come from. I think it's important to have fair policies that are equally distributed, but to also understand that we have to listen to the child to get the whole story and put restorative practices in place.
Thank you. Dr. Ryswick, your take.
Yeah, thank you. Let me say something that to me is very unique. You mentioned, Knox County has urban, rural, and suburban, and I think we are, some say the largest small town in the state, right? We have all of those. And so I'll say that's the beauty of Knox County. And I'll also say this problem is solvable in Knox County. I don't know that I can say that about Chicago. I don't know that I can say that about Memphis, but I think we can say that about Knoxville. This problem is solvable. When we talk about equity, I think we're talking about three things. As Dr. Cash said, I think we're talking about equitable opportunities no matter what zip code you're in. I think we're talking about successful schools, no matter what zip code you're in. I think we're talking about academic outcomes that are that can be better than they are now. It's unacceptable when we look at our ACT scores that our average ACT this past year was a 20.2. If you are a black student, it's 16.2, and Hispanic 18.1. That's unacceptable for Knox County with the resource that we have. And we have to do better, and we will do better. Other things we talk about in equity, so definitely closing those gaps. We need to close achievement gaps for students so that everyone has a chance. We also need to respect and appreciate diversity. When you look at our diversity levels, it's going to be important, and research shows that students have better outcomes when there are teachers and leaders that resemble them. And so when we look at that, Knox County has a Hispanic population and their students of 11.3. We should have a goal to be representative in our teaching force, in our administrative force, and our district office force that is at least comparable to that. Currently, I'll say our school level, we have 0.39% Hispanic leaders in leadership roles in our schools. Again, does that, we can say Knox County doesn't have those, we post those positions, but what are we doing to actively recruit, to look outside of Knoxville if need be, to build and develop people within to be ready to do that? So to me, those will be the goals we have around equity. Increase our diversity. I've said this oftentimes. I was raised a white man, right? And I have that perspective. I can go through trainings to become empathetic, but I can't take on the same thought process of a black female or Hispanic male and bring that. The way I bring that voice to the table is I have representation on leadership and on classrooms, and that's how we can have a conversation about all students.
I want to drill down on this just quickly, and both of you may know this number better than I, but I think I have this right. And let's talk about specifically this disparity. And I raised this because it was one of Superintendent Thomas's goals at the start. One of his 3 pillars was to reduce achievement gaps and disparities among students. And this was something he shared recently that he wanted to do more of. And I think his words were, there's more work to be done here. The specific one I'm talking about is black students make up about 43% of the suspensions in Knox County schools, but only 17% of the population. I hope I'm correct with that, but I know there's a huge disparity. How do you attack that specific challenge, Dr. Cash? And I'm going to leave it to you for 2 minutes.
That's alarming. To be honest with you, that's very alarming. Some of that tells me that we are not doing enough to understand where they're coming from and to dig into what can we do within our community to understand and know. I think when you look at those numbers, you have to involve community members that live in those districts and in those areas to help us understand why that's happening. And is our first response to suspend, or are we looking for alternative actions that keep those kids in class? I think sometimes it's a quick fix to suspend, and I think that that's not always the necessary path. I think it's breaking down and understanding. I always talk about kids have triggers, and so are we recognizing and understanding the triggers that kids have? Do we give them an opportunity to have a cool down period and then to have conversations about it? Of course, if it's violent, that's something totally different. But that number disturbs me, and I think I would begin to look at why are we suspending? And if we've got those kind of numbers, there needs to be some intervention in how we meet and work with those students. And that's when you bring in people that understand those cultures and may be able to give us some insight. And maybe we get them involved in community activities, in community service. One of the things I've found is that when kids are involved in community service, they start to understand themselves better and they start to give back more. So I think you have to have a full-on discussion about this is an issue and this is a problem. We need help solving this problem.
Thank you, Dr. Cash. Dr. Reiswick?
Yeah, I would just say this is a much more complex issue than it appears on the surface. And I think we have to caution ourselves not to make quick generalizations on it. When I look at the statistics about other factors that play into that, 54% of our black students in Knox County are also economically disadvantaged or low socioeconomic. That's a huge factor. And so, you speak to things that are bigger even than the school system. The school system is part of that, but the school system also has to have community partnerships. We have to have economic engines in communities so that there are jobs and so that there are professionals in places so that, that we can have role models and we can work through those kinds of things. So the school system has a piece for that. I will say, having been part of the system, out of my department, we launched the Department of School Culture about 3 years ago, specifically for this. And a lot of our folks who've been formerly on the Disparity in Education Task Force and the Educational Alliance Task Force now looking at these work very closely with that Department of School Culture. And they know the trainings we're doing in restorative practices, and they know the restorative interventionists we put out. We were at South Doyle Middle School today with Mr. Norris, who's the principal there. We spent time, and I went classroom to classroom with him, and his alternative to suspension is what he's called, ATS room. Had 4 rooms for that, and said basically what we're doing now is we're suspending for violent acts. A punch, a push. I mean, those kinds of things that we're going, something has to be done in order to have some order. Outside of that, all of our suspensions now serve time in here to do these with restorative practices and then earn their way, if you will, back into their behavior by showing what they're doing to get back into regular class. So I want to say this, Knox County is not ignoring that, and we continue to push into that. It's a very complex issue that doesn't just have one solution. And I assure you, knowing our principals, they stand in the line of trying to keep order and run the school as well as trying to be very relational oriented. I love the fact that all of the principals that I talk to, they understand that even if there's a violation and a consequence, that it's important to restore every student back into a relationship for a second, third, fourth chance.
Thank you both for allowing a deeper question there. We're going to stay in a similar vein here with question number 10, Dr. Reiswick, to you. And there are really 2 parts to this question. In what subjects should race be considered and included in the curriculum as vital to the understanding of that subject? That's one question. The second is, what is your position on the inclusion of age-appropriate teaching about what some might call uncomfortable history?
You did say hot topics, right? No, no, that's a great question. I think on this one, I would support accurate teaching of history. We don't set standards in Knox County. We follow state standards in Knox County. So as those standards change, we change with that as well. I will be honest with you, we've had a policy for many years that has served us locally, and I think that it's the right answer, local control in that. If there's any material that people felt was controversial, if there was any material that people felt was offensive, we have a policy for alternative assignments. We have a method by which families and parents can challenge any content that's there. We have review committees, and that's served us well for years. I will tell you that, again, I believe that is the right way local should be done. I think sometimes the state steps into situations and makes decisions on certain things that maybe were better served at a local level. But we do stand behind teaching what accurate history is, and I know that's up for interpretation, but we by law are held to teach the standards that are laid out by the state.
Thank you. Dr. Cash, your take on that?
Well, actually, I concur with John. We are called to teach the standards that are adopted by the state of Tennessee, and in those standards, we expect our teachers to teach the accurate history and noting that the cultures that are in your room and recognizing there may be different cultures and having conversations, but it still goes back to using approved material and teaching those standards, but also allowing for conversations to occur based on that accurate information. I am a firm believer that parents should have a voice. So if we are teaching or discussing something that they are sensitive to or offended, there are processes in place and policies in place that allow them to tackle that and handle that. And we do always, and I think that the policies are across the state from TSBA, parents can ask and request a different material. I don't think you pull information. I think you teach it accurately, and if someone wants some different material, then there's a process to go through to handle that.
I want to ask you about another subject matter that some of these questions hint at, but I just want to get more specific. When it comes to school counselors, we know that there's a certain number nationally that is seen as appropriate for schools. And I think it's one counselor for every 250 students. It's in that zone. In Knox County, I think it's one counselor for every 325 right now, if memory serves. We just did a story in the last week showing that even pre-pandemic numbers are showing that 1 in 7 students are writing out a plan for suicide. We have a crisis of mental health among our young people in this community and this country. And Dr. Cash, is there something you can do as superintendent to highlight that problem or to help it?
The one thing that I tell you is that's something we cannot do alone. So we need to partner with our mental health partners. We need to partner with our local hospitals and have great conversations about how to look at that and what to do. In the school systems, I do want to say that school counselors are not trained in mental health, so they need support. So partnering with mental health organizations to come in the school and to have those options available. I know that we partner with McNabb, which is in Knoxville, and in doing that, they have supplied the mental health piece to assist our counselors. I will tell you, I believe at some point that we need schools with social workers that can help train our teachers and help train our students and take a look at those issues and concerns. But I want to be very careful to say school counselors do not have the background or the training to handle the mental health, so they need assistance. But what we do need is more school counselors that can go in the classrooms and talk about feelings and emotions and how to handle conflict. But if it's a true mental health issue, we need more than a school counselor, so that's when we have to have those partnerships.
Thank you, Dr. Cash. Dr. Reiswick?
Yeah, I think a lot of that I agree. It's very accurate, and I think I would say first of all that responsibility is not solely on the counselor. Again, when we look at things in education, sometimes we say, well, if we just lower that ratio, we'd be fine. Counselors do a myriad of other things, and depending on the degree of the issue, may or may not be the appropriate one to deal with that. It does take partnerships. Helen Ross McNabb, we've had with us for a long time. We've expanded that contract as well for this year to include additional. I think that's the right place. I think the right place is not necessarily to take that on, that the school system owns counselors, but I think if an organization's already doing that well and has a good reputation for that, we contract and piggyback with that. I said it wasn't all on counselors. Here's what I mean by that. We talked about some of the career readiness in that grades 6 through 12. Well, part of that is a structure where you make big small, and it's called like a small learning community structure. And so the 7 high schools that have adopted that with the work with Ford right now, part of that is this kind of restructure of how the adults do business, where you have a traditional math wing, science wing, social studies wing. Instead, you're teaching around a group of students. Think of like a freshman academy where social studies teacher might be by math, might be by English, might be by science. I've taught in a school like that before, and what you see is 2 things happen. There's still time to do your professional planning, but there's also time for those teams of teachers to talk and know students. They're rubbing elbows with them in the hall. They're all a team. They're seeing the same kids every day. And when I say it's bigger than just the counselors, that's where those things are identified. That's where someone finds the note, but they're teaching beside someone who's in another subject. That's where this kid's having a hard time, but they have a relationship with that teacher and want to send them across the hall. That's when those adults have a hot list of kids who just don't seem like they're themselves today. And they talk about that, and then they go seek the next level. We think it's a tiered structure. Our school culture program does the same thing. We have certain levels of expertise on that counselors can call up to and get district support for people who have additional ability to come and do that and assess and to be part of that. So I think it takes a network of all of those things to happen, not just lowering ratios, but it would be nice to lower ratios as well.
Thank you, Dr. Reiswick. And we're going to stick sort of with that theme and a specific question from a parent in Knox County who says, how would you handle bullying in our schools? And for context, the person who submitted this question said their nephew had been bullied in a middle school here in Knox County. Dr. Reiswick?
Yeah, let me start by saying bullying should never be tolerated. Harassment should not be tolerated either. I don't know any of our schools who would think that it should. And unfortunately, with things like social media and the increase of those, some of that's harder and harder to track. Our administrators have to do a good job and a thorough investigation on kind of what's going on with some of those things. But we do have a zero tolerance when it comes to bullying and harassment for any reason. And no student should feel unsafe. No student should feel like, they can't come to school or they can't go to class because of those things. And, I would say this, work with your school. They'll handle that. If they don't handle that, man, call me. Like, we're not going to tolerate that. We don't tolerate bullying in Knox County.
Period, the end. Dr. Cash?
I think that your first thing is we're hoping that the students have an adult in the building that they feel comfortable with and that they are going to talk about. The last thing that we want is for things to be going on that we have no knowledge of, because if we don't have knowledge of it, we can't address it and fix it. I would also say it's important to look at programs that you can put in place, such as the AVEAS program, which looks at bullying and different types of bullying, and it talks about bystanders. So we teach children not to be bystanders, that if you see it, you tell and you work through that. I think that if parents feel that and they're concerned, the first step is always to contact the school. It's always that first level of contact, and then they work through those. It could be what the student may be feeling as bullying, maybe something different, because again, you have to look where a kid is coming from, but to sit down and address it and look for it, because you want all children to feel safe. If those resolutions cannot be at the school level, then you do have to bring it on up to the district level so the district can take a deeper dive. But I do think you have to have a culture which says we won't tolerate bullies, we want friends, and we help each other. So if you see something, you tell.
Thank you. Dr. Cash, we're going to stick with you on this question, and it is somewhat related to what we've been talking about. It was submitted by a member of the community who asked both of you to talk about school security reform in the district, and I believe this is referring to uniformed officers that we have as a district. So tell us, what is your vision for school security within the district, not only when it comes to the security division, but also the relationship that law enforcement partners like the Knoxville Police Department and the Knox County Sheriff's Office have with the school district?
I think it's very important that those partnerships are there. It is there not just for the protection and looking at security, but it is also there to build relationships and trust among our students so that they feel like there is someone they can go to and partner with. Having the difference between our own security and the backup from local, whether it's the Sheriff's Department or the Police Department, gives us that extra layer. So if there is something that needs to be handled by law enforcement, it can be handled quickly and taken care of. But if you don't have those pieces in place and those officers are not in the hallways interacting with students and interacting with adults, then the students won't be able to see them as somewhere that is safe to go. So that double layer, I think, is a protection not only for our students and our teachers, but for our community as a whole, to know that that's there. It's a visible presence, and I think that visible presence makes a difference, but also that interaction with those students and those families.
Dr. Reiswick, your perspective on that question?
I would say, as a superintendent, if chosen to be the superintendent, the only thing more important than the academic outcomes is safety in a school. So I do support law enforcement in schools, and I think the broader scope of what they do is things like snow days. I can remember times when we've had bad snows and we've called, and only their four-wheel drives could go meet a bus that was stopped to take them. I think of traffic, especially folks in Hardin Valley. I think of traffic and how the control of how they help move through those things every day in, day out. I do think of the relationships they have with students. I do think times they intervene to get the right things done. So they are a huge partner of ours, both the Sheriff's Department and KPD, and us keeping our schools safe and working together to make that happen. I will say this, a friend of mine uses this term or uses this saying, and I like it. We always reserve the right to get smarter, right? And I think that's important, that we are assessing all the time as partners what the best way to do that is. What are new methods? What are best ideas in that, so that we can continue to be better to keep our schools safe. But I do support law enforcement in schools.
Do either of you support having clear bag policies or metal detectors inside high schools in Knox County? Is that something that you would ever consider or think is a good idea? Dr. Reiswick?
Yeah, I would say no. I mean, I think you never say never. I think what happens is in extreme situations, there may be things that call for that. But no, I would say that does not let kids feel school is supposed to be their place, their safe place. And I don't think those are the right way to go about doing that. Now, I think about national tragedies like 9/11. Obviously, there are things that come into effect when things like that happen. So the only thing that would allow you to do that for a shortened period of time would be a safety issue that called for that for some reason, and that was the only way we could be safe. But no, as a regular practice, I would not support that.
Dr. Cash, your perspective.
No, as a regular practice, I would not, because we want students to feel like they are safe and that it's their second home, not that we are trying to lock them in or lock people out. What we want is for them to know that that is a safe place, but to put those kind of protocols in place, I think is not necessary. But I also agree with John. There may be times and situations where you have to increase that, but as a general practice, I would not support that.
Thank you. Here is another question about security in schools that has to do with dangers to students. This community member asks, how will you address the use of drugs or vaping products in our schools? And Dr. Reiswick, we'll start with you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, vaping is a serious issue, and I think we had. It's a serious issue because one, the health effects on students. It's a serious issue because the volume with which we were dealing with that, and I'm going to say pre-pandemic, was a huge distraction away from our administrators and teachers to learning. That was a big deal. So it is a big issue, and we're seeing it kind of resurge now that the pandemic has become more normalized, if you want to say it that way. And I think that we need to get back to we had task forces. We were looking at things. Even the local health department and health councils were trying to look at that. There were some campaigns from students themselves. My daughter was part of one of those that were putting out videos and things to try to say this is not the right way to go. I think we do need to engage in that again for the health issues that it's causing, but also for the distraction to academics that's happening in our schools.
Dr. Cash?
So I always think you start with talking with the students and asking the questions of why. So I would, again, pull groups of students together and say, talk to me about what's happening, talk to me about what's going on. And then when students start to begin to drive that, and you do put student campaigns out there, and there are other things to do than this, I think you get a better reaction than if you come down extremely hard. But I also think it's educating students. I think it's bringing in people from other organizations to talk to them about the health issues, about what happens. You may not feel anything now, but this may happen. It may be laced with something else. You need to know that this could happen. And when you start having open conversations with kids, you start to change the way they think. And if you reach one kid and they change their mind about what they're doing, you have a success. That partnership with law enforcement is key when it comes to drugs. But we also want to do the fact that let's help our kids, let's train our kids, let's see if, is there something going on in their life where they're using that to self-medicate, or is it just a one-time thing? So I think it's much more than they're using. What I've found over the years is kids will do different things, and by the time we've got a handle on it, they've switched to something else. So I think it has to always be an ongoing conversation, but you are trying to teach them and train them, but you will not tolerate it on your campus. The drugs you will not tolerate. Of course, right now, vaping, if it doesn't have THC in it, is treated like tobacco, so it's a citation and all of those pieces and parts that go in it. But when it comes to something where it is more harmful and it is drug-related, then it has to be turned over to law enforcement.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I have a question that comes from a conversation with with Superintendent Thomas. One of his pieces of advice to whomever fills his shoes was building relationships. It feels funny asking this question right now because both of you have been building relationships since 7:30 this morning with members of the community. But Dr. Cash, could you give our audience a little sense of how you build relationships and where you place the value in that?
really, if you talk to my team, they will tell you that that's one of my strengths because it's intentional. It is taking the time out to talk to people about their families, about their personal lives, not just school life, and that's across the board. It is attending county commission meetings and getting to know them and understand them. They have a heavy load. They are our funding body, so we need to build relationships with them. Many times I have gone to lunch with many of my community members. Also, I think it's important to be on boards and that you're supporting things like Boys and Girls Club, all those community entities out there being a part of what they do and building those relationships. There is nothing more valuable than being able to pick up the phone. I actually had someone from Boys and Girls Club, he actually emailed me and said, hey, I've got a student that's really having problems. They attend X school. Can you give me some advice? I said, I can. Let me give you the number of the assistant principal there who knows this child personally. Y'all can go back and forth and figure out what's happening with this child. You don't get that kind of support unless you've done the building of the relationships and the friendships. And that's a key. It's not just a relationship around education. It becomes a friendship so that you can actually have deep conversations about students and change and what needs to happen and after school programs, before school programs. I purposely build relationships with my principals. I purposely build relationships with my teachers because they need to know I'm human and they need to know that I make mistakes. And in building those relationships, you're building bridges so that when something needs to happen, you can handle it together. At the same time, you can also celebrate with them when they've got wins and when we're winning as a district. It is intentional. It's not just by hazard. It's valuable and incredible what we can do together, and if we don't have that bridge, we start to fall apart.
Thank you. Dr. Reiswood.
A great question, and I would say building relationships or maintaining relationships to me is one of the major roles of the superintendent. You know, there are a lot of staff who will carry out the day-to-day execution of things, but really only the superintendent has the ability to have some of those relationships. I'll say locally, I mean, I have a relationship with county commissioners. I have a relationship with the mayors, with the leadership at UT and other community leaders, and I look forward to continuing that and building new things from that. I'll say this about relationships. Relationships aren't built in a time of crisis, and I think that's important. There has to be a regular rhythm to meetings and conversations that are taking place so that when those crises come, your first thought is to call each other and have conversations, not to do that only in a time of crisis. So I think that's important. I do think internal relationships are as important for the superintendent as external. A practice that I began 5 years ago when I became the assistant superintendent was to spend a day each semester with one elementary, one middle school, and one high school teacher from bus duty to the end of the day. Turn my phone off and I spend the whole day in the classroom. And for me, that's a pulse check for what decisions we're making. What does it feel like on the ground? That first hour is usually really awkward for the teacher. I'm not going to lie. They're like, what are you doing here? I shed the jacket, right? And I look like, man, I play the whole thing. And by 10 o'clock in the morning, they're starting to tell me, why do we adopt this textbook? I really don't like this. By lunchtime, they're inviting their friends to sit with me. And we just talk, and we talk about what's going on. And sometimes I can let them in behind the curtain and tell them this is why X, Y, and Z happened. But it's great for me to then come back to our team and be able to talk about things. And I will continue that as superintendent. I think that's critical to do that geographically in different regions and all 3 grade bands every semester. I think another thing I've done is I've sat down with 8 principals a year, one kind of from each geographical region, each semester rather, 8 a year, 4 per semester. And I sit down with questions for them about us. How are we doing? I'm not asking them about how their performance, what are their kids. I'm asking them, talk to me about our teaching and learning department. What's going well with that? Who's your point of contact? What have they done for you in the last month? Who's been here to visit your school? Our special ed department, all the departments, I'm over 8 of those. We sit down and we talk through those. And what I tell them is this conversation is anonymous. I'll go back to our team because there's always threads throughout that semester that I'll pick up. It gives me the ability to go back to our team and go, guys, I think we thought this, but this is how it feels in the field. I think that kind of internal relationship and that kind of practice is important so that you don't lose touch with what really matters back to the school and the classroom where it happens.
Thank you. We're entering about the last 20 minutes of our forum, and thanks again to our audience for being so respectful to our candidates. We just have a few more questions we're going to get to before we wrap things up. One thing we want to mention is several questions submitted by the community ask candidates to weigh in on issues that are under debate in the state legislature, and the next superintendent won't be able to vote on matters before the legislature. Important to know that. You will have a platform, though, to share your views, as both of you have talked about. So one question from the community asked the following: if the state legislature passes a bill that you view as actively harmful to the quality public education, how will you respond as the leader of Knox County Schools? Dr. Reiswick, your answer to that question.
So, a good question. I think that I will say this: my voice will be heard. I will make sure that I go through the proper channels for that. I have relationships with the Department of Education. I have relationships with the Tennessee State Board of Education, and have used those conversations over the last couple of years when things come up to be clear with what that is. With the state legislators, we just had a luncheon with them about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. We exchanged phone numbers. We have those conversations. They have asked for input into those. I think that is one of the roles of the superintendent, to reciprocate that conversation when those things are happening, and to voice just how that would play out in the district and the impact that for the district. So that is the proper channel to me of how that's done. Again, focus on what we can control post that. When decisions are made or laws are passed and they're in there, we obviously are going to follow the law, and we're not going to fire back on those things. So our job is to make sure on the front side that the voice of the district is heard and we're clear and we're concise. And I'll tell you that we have been successful in getting some bills either delayed and or killed or altogether just through conversations we've had around understanding that. And I'm sure other superintendents are reaching out too. But I think that's an important role to stay abreast on that. We have a group, we have lobbyists that are on the ground that are hearing those things and updating us on that. It's real important that the superintendent stays engaged in those weekly calls, understands what that means and the impact for the district. And I think that's an important role.
Dr. Cash?
Well, I can tell you that you can't wait until the bill is passed. You have to stay abreast of what's happening and read the bills yourself and make phone calls about what did you mean, how does this unfold. I have personal relationships with just a lot of the legislators up there. They call me, I call them. It is a back and forth. They are under a lot of political pressure. So the louder our voice can be about, let me talk to you about how this looks in our district. Let me talk to you about how this looks in the classroom. And then they'll start saying, well, how do I fix this bill? How do I make it work? And many times I've taken a bill and got a group of teachers or a group of administrators and said, this is what's out there. How do you fix this? What do you do? It's going to pass. We have the opportunity to change it and to make it morph. When we've done that, we've been very successful with having the amendments in place and changing those. There are some that we're like, we didn't even know that one was out there. How did that get passed? And in that, we start making phone calls and I start talking to the legislators about, okay, this one we're going to need to work with. So help me understand what you really meant. How do we change this? What do? We need to make this work for us. Some of them that come out, honestly, you don't even know why it's out there. It's like, this makes no sense. And then you start digging and you find that it's harmful, and that's when you start saying, hey, I don't know why this is out there, but when I look at this, this is what this means to me. Well, that was not my intent, but the language sometimes that they use can make things difficult for us and make difficult for us to even implement. And so when you start thinking, yeah, all that sounds great and looks great, but I don't have the people that can do that on the ground. So unless you're going to provide me with the funding to back it up, a lot of times the fiscal note will knock the bill out. And sometimes that's what I start telling them. This looks good, but you have no physical impact. I don't have the personnel to do that. So a lot of times it's just deep conversations with them because they think it looks good and sounds good, and they don't understand the depth of what you have to implement it. That is the process. There's also the process of going through your legislative sessions, listening to your legislative sessions, having prior meetings with legislators to say what's on the agenda, what are you seeing, what are the hot topics. But it's actively engaged and actively involved. And there again, you've got to build those relationships so it's a back and forth. I've got them and they'll call, hey, what do you think about this? And I'll go, do you want me to tell you the truth, or do you, what do you really want? But those kind of relationships will say, well, I just wanted to know. A lot of them will text me from the floor and say, hey, this is coming up. Is this a yes or a no? If it's a yes, I say, we appreciate this. Let's go for it. If I say no, can you delay this? Can you do something with it? That's what has to happen in the legislative ring. I don't think most of the time, I don't think there's an intent to harm. I think it is they think they're doing positive things and it ends up with an unintended consequence.
We just have 2 more questions before we get to closing remarks from each of you. This question has to deal with the 9-member school board that will decide your future. The Board of Education has faced in recent months strong views that have been reflected in discussions as well as public forum. Their questions have been innumerable that they've tried to answer. So the community member who asked this says, Dr. Cash, how will your leadership help unite a divided school board and community?
It is, in my opinion, the responsibility of the director of schools to keep your board informed on everything. And when I say informed on everything, no one should ever feel like they have more information than another board member. They should never feel like one is informed and one is not. I think it's ongoing conversations about where the district is and where the district needs to go, revisiting that strategic plan with them and talking about their role in the strategic plan. It is constantly communicating with them. It is honestly going away and going to retreats to say, how do we get better as a board? Because we are responsible for all of these students and all of their successes, so we have to pull together. What's our voice? What's the voice of the board? It's also my job as the director of schools to honestly protect the board and to keep them from getting blindsided by something that's happening or going on. So oftentimes I will just text and say, I just want you to know this is going on right now. If someone calls you, please say that you are aware and that you will get back with them. Because the last thing I want them to say is, I didn't know anything about that. So if I'm giving them the information and building them up and talking to them, now, do they always have to agree? They do not. But they have to respectfully honor what other board members are saying and thinking in a respectful manner, but also moving forward as a district. You can't let the differences keep the district from moving forward. It is communication again. It is relationships again. I just don't ever want them to think they're out there on their own. I am their employee, and so it's my job to keep them informed and keep them pulled together.
Thank you. Dr. Reiswick?
I think I'd start with maybe, in my opinion or my perspective in having relationships with these folks, I would probably push back on the question a little bit on here to say we have a board that's so divided. I think we have a board who's very united when it comes to things for students. I mean, we've seen things pass like the ESSER 3.0 plan, no problem, across the board. We've seen things like the contract with Ford Next Generation Learning for us to move forward with redesign high schools, no problem on that. I think what we see are hot button issues in society where there's division that manifests itself on the board. And so I guess I would probably correct that first and say, I think our board's very unified in what they want to do for teachers and what they want to do for students. And I think they're effective in that work. I think some of the issues that rise to the top that people think are the hot topics, which really probably don't have as much impact on the school they're seeing as that. So I guess not that they need defense. I mean, they could do that themselves, but I don't see it that way. But I would say, something to what Dr. Cash said, the superintendent's role is key because with sunshine laws, they're unable to talk. And what I see in here lots of times is 9 people who have a good idea, and the person who can hear and see it all hears that. And there's not a way for them to have a conversation to come to that. There's a lot of consensus if there was a way to have those conversations prior to coming up. Unfortunately, all of their consensus building happens publicly. And so I think that's tougher to understand, and it's a very tough situation to play it out that way. But I do think the superintendent can help in those situations. when he makes those calls, and he can by law have those conversations with individual board members about things and about how what he's hearing and what he's seeing and what he thinks best for the district, and helping people understand that. So I think he does have a role to play in that. And I know sometimes the board may not agree with the superintendent, and I think that's okay too. It's okay that there is a professional disagreement with good rationales in that situation. So I think that's how I'd answer that.
Thank you. Our final question tonight, and Dr. Reiswick, we'll stick with you before we go to closing statements, is around goals. The typical superintendent contract is 3 to 5 years across the country, so let's just take 3 years for argument's sake. What is one goal that each of you would like to achieve for Knox County at the end of your first year, and another goal you'd like to achieve at the end of your third year? Dr. Reiswick?
Two areas for me that are going to be critical that I think we can make quick progress on. One is in the areas I mentioned before, the career empowerment being one of those. I'm super encouraged that the 7 of our 16 high schools have started this reimagining high school work. I want to see all of them at the end of the year 1 with the freshman academy and building out what they're going to do for those 10 to 12 with engaging business partners. And I want to see that second cohort on board as they're in that design process with the hope to 3 to 4 years have all of our high schools moving in that area so that it's a different experience for students. And then the other one I would say that needs immediate attention is we do have some schools that are again hover in that 10% proficiency rate. And it's not a fault of the principal and it's not a fault of the teachers. We need to bring in some external support and some external structures, as I mentioned earlier, to get a strategic, comprehensive, sustainable plan. There we go. For feeder patterns that exist that way. We owe that to those students. We owe that support to those principals. And that's how it's more attractive for teachers to come and work in an area like that. So to me, those are 2 big priorities.
Thank you. Dr. Cash, year 1 and then year 3.
I think year 1, you are developing and casting a vision for the district and a vision that everyone can get behind that results in increased student achievement and increased interest and excitement in our schools. That is year 1. It is casting that vision and developing the support behind the vision. By year 3, you're seeing such momentum that people are wanting to come to see what we're doing because the achievement will go so fast when you have a single focus and a single vision and you're bringing people in. Definitely want to see an increase in the literacy scores and the math scores. I think it is also those CTE areas that you need to tackle to actually add more access and provide opportunities for students. It's very strategic. It is involving other people, but I still believe you have to start with the vision. What's the vision and how do you cast that vision for people to get on board and get behind you?
Thank you. Well, we've come to the conclusion when it comes to the questions, so we're going to now move to closing statements. And Dr. Reiswick, we'll start with you. We're going to limit these to 5 minutes apiece, just in the interest of time. So please make your case for why you'd like to be the superintendent.
No, thank you, and thank everyone tonight for listening to us talk for 2 hours. We appreciate that. I hope you can tell that I'm excited about the future of Knox County. I will tell you this, I applied for one superintendent job, and it's this job. I don't want to be the superintendent anywhere else. I want to be the superintendent of Knox County Schools. I have the experience as a change agent working within our district. I have the relationships to hit the ground running on day 1, to bring these plans into action and make a huge difference from kids. I want to make sure our focus as a district stays on students. And I want this to be my last job. I don't have another plan after this. This is what I want to do. This is where I want to be, and I have no plans of leaving Knoxville. I want to make this great, and I want to give back to a community that's given to me and my family.
Thank you, Dr. Reiswick. Dr. Cash.
When I think about impact, I think about influence. I think that's the reason to be here. I think that Knox County is set for great things, and I would love to be a part of the strategic change, that building those relationships, bringing those community partners in, and moving forward. It's solidified today with me when I interacted with those students. Interacting with those students said, you can make a difference. Your leadership and your style of pushing and pulling and making sure we're doing things right for kids, that's why you're here. That's why you applied. That's what you want. And interesting enough, when I was leaving one of the schools, the students said, "Hey, if you're our director, will you come back and talk to us?" And I thought, how powerful is that you already have students who say they want to talk to you. So when I look at it, why do I want to be here? I want to impact every student that enters our doors. I want to impact every family that enters our doors. I want to involve the community. I want us to be the model for Tennessee and beyond that says they do education right. And it's not a one-person job. It's not a central office job. It is a community job. And so when I look at it, I think how wonderful the community resources are here. To be able to sit with all the people that we sat with and talked today, and they're on board. They want it. You don't find communities that are that ready to launch and that ready to do what's necessary. That's why I want to be. I want to be a part of the change. I want to be a part of the success. But most importantly, I want to be a part of each kid's life. And so I thank you for giving me the time to speak to you tonight. It's an honor to be here, and I look forward to many things to come. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking our candidates. I just want to note that the late Tennessee Senator Howard Baker once said that if he had to do it all over again, he would have run for school board because that's where the real decisions in a community are made. And we're going to see the school board make one of the most important decisions we've seen in years for this community in choosing either of these candidates to lead Knox County Schools and its 60,000 plus students and more than 7,000 members of the staff. So I just want to run through just a couple of particulars for those of you who want to continue to follow this process because these candidates are not done. Dr. Linda Cash will be interviewed tomorrow at 10:40 in the morning by the Board of Education. The candidates will be interviewed separately. Dr. John Ryswick will be interviewed at 1:20, and both of those meetings will be live streamed at knoxcountyschools.org/KCS-TV. Next week, the Board of Education will meet at 5 in the evening on Tuesday, the 22nd of February, and that is when the board, the 9-member board, is expected to make its choice about who will become the next superintendent of Knox County Schools. Again, we want to thank the Superintendent Search Committee. It's been a long road just to get here. Since September, they have been actively working. Ebony Satterfield, we appreciate your leadership on board that search committee and all the members of it to get such terrific candidates before the community of Knoxville. And again, we're going to cut this a little bit short. These candidates have been going for more than 12 hours straight, so we're going to give them some time to get rested and then get back in front of the board for some important interviews tomorrow. We appreciate all of you tuning in to us live through the live streams and also to all of you who have been such a respectful audience. We appreciate your time. Have a great evening.